Hello, Big Bear Association of Realtors. It's time for us to give you our C.A.R. reports from the fall business meetings, which took place in Los Angeles this year. Just a reminder, your state directors are Mike Sanis, Nancy Arand, and Mickey Peterson. And it's been really interesting to see how things unfold over the years going to these meetings. For many years, they've been talking about things like rent control, more recently independent contractor status. And last year I told you about C.A.R. Board of Directors approving the Californians for Home Ownership Legal Foundation. And they formed that last year, and actually right now that legal foundation is actively suing the city of Whittier for not complying with ADU state law. They're actively out there right now searching for municipalities that don't comply. Rent control has been a big issue at these meetings for many years, and just this year it passed into law. You'll be hearing more about that from Nancy later in the reports. I wanted to report back on how fantastic it's been to be in our new region at C.A.R. Talking with towns like Mammoth, Lake Arrowhead, Wrightwood, and now the entire high desert has really been gratifying. We go to our caucus meetings and we actually talk about issues that are meaningful to our areas, like the hauled water issue and most recently homeowners insurance, which is huge after all of the fires. As we know, 2018 was the biggest year for destruction due to fires. So insurance, as we all know, is very difficult right now, and especially in our region. So it's very gratifying to meet and actually talk about things and try to take action where we can take these issues as a region and try to discover how we can move them up the chain at C.A.R. to try to get some legislative issues going with it and get it to the state and hopefully get something done about that to help us in our regions. C.A.R.'s CEO, Joel Singer, also talked to us at one of my AE meetings about fire insurance, and he basically said he realizes it's a huge issue, but he has no idea what C.A.R. can help us do about it. So he is actually asking for suggestions, and if you guys can think of anything, I'm all ears, and I'll bring it back to our meetings in February. So send me an email, give me a call, I'm all ears. My association executive meetings were very informative, tons of information, operational things that just will help us do what we need to do, and it would absolutely bore you to tears. So I'm just going to let you know that I learned new methods of processing dues billing and things that help our association stay in compliance. It was practically 2 days worth of meetings talking about this stuff, but like I said, to report it to you would pretty much make you fall asleep. But anyway, speaking of dues billing, just wanted to let you know C.A.R. is not raising dues in 2020, so you can look forward to not having any additional money to spend at the end of the year, which is always a rough time. C.A.R. is making their 2020 budget with a projected decrease in membership. They're looking at about a 4,000 member decrease. That's our projection for 2020. We're currently at a little over 209,000 for the state, and they're projecting a little over 205,000 for 2020. That projected decrease in membership comes with C.A.R.'s prediction that we're coming into a small recession. They're not quite clear on exactly when that might happen, but they say it could be any time now, so they're just gearing up for that now. C.A.R. did profit greatly from their sale of zip forms, so they have a lot of money in reserves now, and they plan on using some of that money to help push the Prop 5 ballot initiative, which is the tax portability initiative that you all paid your additional $100 assessment on a couple years ago. So now they're not going to be taking money out of your pockets again. They'll be using their reserves and pushing that forward, trying to get that next year in 2020. They'll be trying to get that passed. The last thing from me is a tidbit on AB 5. That was a bill that came through legislation as the Uber Lyft bill, and that's geared towards independent contractors. So they're trying to take the Dynamex decision and blanket over all independent contractors to make them work under employee law. Luckily, licensed real estate agents did get granted an exception. So good for everyone. You can still do business as usual. One thing that C.A.R., specifically Gov. Hutchinson, does urge you to do is if you're currently hiring a transaction coordinator and you're paying them on a file-by-file or transaction-by-transaction basis, before January 2020, which is when that bill and that law will go into place, do call C.A.R.'s legal hotline, and we'll give you that number. And they will help you. If you just explain the situation, they'll help you determine if you're complying with that law or if you need to make some changes. So do keep your finger on the pulse with that one. Just make sure that anyone that you're currently using as an independent contractor does comply with all of those guidelines. That's it from me. I want to thank you for your time, and that concludes my report.
Good morning. I am reporting on the Home Ownership Housing Committee. We had 2 action items, and the first one was that C.A.R. sponsored legislation to require the California Affordable Housing Cost Study, and this was originally released in, the last one was released in 2014, and it studied affordable housing that was built between 2001 and 2011, and the cost difference between building affordable housing versus market rate housing. And one of the things they found was that the affordable rate housing in some instances was more expensive. So what they want to do is they want to further this study and find out just exactly why. There was great disparity in housing costs from $100,000 per unit to over $500,000 per unit for affordable housing. So C.A.R. would like to get to the bottom of that and see what we can do. We are going to C.A.R. sponsor legislation to require cities and counties to reduce impact and development fees imposed on affordable housing units proportional to the affordability of the unit. One of the things that we're finding is that it's not just low-income housing that this state needs. We need what's called workforce housing. Okay, and workforce housing will address issues for teachers, first responders, policemen, firemen, and other professionals that can't afford to live where they work. And so C.A.R. would like to encourage cities to build these workforce housing projects. And so that concludes my report. Thank you very much. Oh, and we're doing our best to help with this housing crisis with homeownership housing. That is our focus, to increase housing opportunities for people of all income levels. Thank you.
Good morning. Today I'm going to be reporting on AB 1482, which is the rent control. The rent control passed. Unfortunately, we had been backing Proposition 10, which was passed not to have rent control. But at the final hours, Governor Newsom signed a bill putting in effect rent control. It does not affect single-family homes. It only affects large apartment buildings, etc. But the increase will be 5%, allowing property owners to increase the rent 5% per year. We feel that this is going to encourage renters or property owners to raise their rent every single year at that 5%. Instead of normally, they wouldn't really raise the rent unless they had a big expense like a new roof and had to cover that. So rent control, we know, doesn't work, but it's in effect now. The next is the tax portability. Last election, we spent quite a bit of money to get the tax portability Proposition 5 on the ballot. That did not pass. So we knew the reasons it did not pass. It was because the firemen and the teachers were against this bill. So C.A.R. went back to the drawing board and rewrote this bill where it would be acceptable to firemen and teachers. Now they are asking, we had a motion on the table to fund $25 million to get signatures to put this on the ballot. Well, it was met with a lot of negativity. People did not want to spend the $25 million to collect signatures. And so it went back and forth and back and forth. And so it went back again. Someone put on the table to bring it down to $10 million for collecting signatures. That again was met with a lot of opposition, but it did go ahead and pass. So we are going to be spending $10 million this year to collect signatures for that, to get that back on the ballot. We'll see what happens on that. The next was Leslie Appleton. Leslie feels that the next year is going to be pretty much the same as this year. We're not going to be seeing a buyer's market quite yet. It's still going to be a balanced market, not a seller's market, not a buyer's market, but a balanced market. Last year, her prediction was 0.03% off from her figures. She's pretty right on with her predictions about the market, so we look forward to the same as we had this year. She's also saying that we need to make sure that we do our pricing correctly to get our homes sold. If we are a little too high, it's too competitive right now, and people are looking for the right kind of a deal. So make sure that you do the right kind of pricing when you're pricing homes to list. And that concludes my report.
Hi, Mike Sanis, reporting on the MLS committee meeting that just occurred at C.A.R. conference. So the motion that was passed in the MLS committee was with regard to California's Consumer Privacy Act, which becomes effective January 1st, 2020. And basically the gist of it was the MLS adopt CCPA related changes into the C.A.R. model MLS rules so that we're in compliance with that. I'll read to you the motion that passed. That upon final approval by NAR, the C.A.R. model MLS rules be revised to add provisions pertaining to the data privacy in light of the California Consumer Privacy Act. And that said or similar additions to Section 11 set forth in the issues briefing paper be adopted to go into effect January 1st, 2020, which is the date the CCPA goes into effect, and that staff make any necessary and related additional corrective and or correlating changes to the model MLS rules and model citation policy. So that is the motion that was passed unanimously. There were other business items discussed. No other action was taken. Maybe just to mention a few that could be coming down the pike, or that was deemed that I found interesting. Excuse me. The NWMLS, which is the Northwest MLS. It's a broker-owned, non-NAR affiliated MLS of around 30,000 licensees in the Seattle area, changed their policy such that the buyer's compensation, the buyer's agent compensation, be made public for syndication sites like Realtor.com, like Zillow, like Trulia. Interesting. That's never happened before, but they decided to do it. Redfin, who is based in Seattle, also said, and this all took effect as of October 1st, so we'll have to give this a look, that they will be on all of their listings nationwide. They will be publicizing, advertising buyer's agent commission on their site as well as Zillow, Trulia, and Realtor.com syndication sites like that. So that was interesting. And that really wraps up the business that took place at the MLS committee meeting. If you have questions, we'll have some information linked for you here as well. Thanks very much. Mike Sanis once again giving you a quick update on the Standard Forms Advisory Committee meeting. So there are 3 new forms for 2020. I'm going to give you a quick overview. We're going to link to where you can see the drafts, the current drafts of these as well. And then there was one change which you can look into as well if you'd like to see what was modified. Start with the California Consumer Privacy Act Advisory. I mentioned it in the MLS rules being changed in our MLS committee update. This is an advisory that C.A.R.'s put out. There are qualifications, one of them being if your business generates over $25 million in income per year, you would have to you would be subject to this new Privacy Act. But it also says that if you interact with a business that would apply to, that you would also have to adhere to this new Privacy Act. So it kind of puts us in an interesting position. It was very difficult for the attorneys to make sense of this at this point. It isn't, it's clear as mud, really it is, for them as well. But the gist of it was this. Because we interact with title companies and lenders a lot of times who would have that sort of business, we would want to, according to the C.A.R. attorneys, use the new California Consumer Privacy Act advisory. They're recommending that you just get it signed on every deal. So have your broker look at it, read up on it, and maybe it'll be part of what we do on a regular basis. It'll be available starting in the draft is available now. The other new form was a rent cap and just cause addendum. So a lot of big news I'm sure you've heard regarding AB 1482 and the rent cap. C.A.R. has put together a draft of a rent cap and just cause addendum. So this would really apply to landlords or agents, brokers who are in the business of managing property for people. It was suggested that this form be used in conjunction with a modification so that everybody's advised. It's an addendum basically that advises and does clearly state the exemptions. Gov had mentioned that in order for your single family home or condo to be exempt, if you have a month-to-month tenant in there, you need to get them to sign prior to the end of this year. Interesting, because it won't be released till the middle of December. But hopefully before January 1st, you'd get them to sign the rent cap and just cause addendum that we're referring to here. So that's number 2. The third one was a new seller's vacant land advisory. We have a seller's advisory you're familiar with that goes with our listing agreements. They have one now for vacant land as well that's specific to that. So take a look for your seller's vacant land advisory as well. Might want to look into using that on a regular basis. Okay, and the one form that did change, and for those interested, you can check it out. The seller instruction to exclude the listing from the multiple listing service. That's the SELM. There was some redlined version changes regarding days on market, how that reflects to days on market. So give that a look as well if you're interested. And that concludes my standard forms report. Thank you.